Could this be the prophecy from the book of Zechariah finally coming true?
Something extraordinary is unfolding on the very mountain where prophets walked, where kings wept, and where Jesus ascended into the clouds. The Mount of Olives, silent for centuries, has begun to move. New fractures cut through ancient stone, pressure zones swell beneath the olive roots, and satellite images reveal a tremor awakening beneath Jerusalem's sacred ridge. Science calls it tectonic tension. Scripture calls it prophecy stirring. And as the ground shifts, one question rises above the dust. Are we witnessing the opening chapter of Zechariah 14? Stay with me. Watch closely, and if this message awakens something in you, like, comment, and subscribe so more people can see what's unfolding. Here, on the eastern edge of Jerusalem, rises a ridge that has witnessed more sacred history than perhaps any other place on earth. The Mount of Olives is not just geography, it is memory. It is a living archive carved into stone, carrying the footsteps of kings, the visions of prophets, and the tears of the Messiah himself. Stand upon its slope and you feel something ancient in the air, as if the mountain still whispers stories older than empires. It was on this ridge that King David fled for his life, barefoot and broken, as his own son, Absalom, sought the throne. Scripture tells us David climbed the Mount of Olives weeping, his head covered in sorrow. Every olive tree here still seems to carry the echo of that grief, reminding the world that this mountain has always been a place where God tests the hearts of his chosen. Centuries later, another prophet stood here, Ezekiel. In a vision that would shake Jerusalem's identity, he saw the glory of the Lord rise from the temple, cross the Kidron Valley, and pause upon the Mount of Olives before departing from Israel. The mountain became the final resting place of the divine presence, the last stop before judgment fell. No other ridge in the world can claim such a moment. And still, the story did not end. Jesus himself walked these paths. It was here he delivered his most mysterious prophecy, Matthew 24, the Olivet Discourse. He spoke of wars, earthquakes, deception, and the shaking of nations. The wind that carried his words across the valley now carries the same warnings to the modern world. And it was also here, on this very slope, that he ascended into the clouds as his disciples watched in stunned silence. Two angels appeared and declared a promise that changed everything. This same Jesus will return in the same way. The Mount of Olives became the hinge between what was and what will be, between the first coming and the second, between human history and divine intervention. Its stones have felt the pressure of heaven meeting earth. Its soil has held the feet of kings, prophets, and the Messiah. No other mountain, not Rome, not Babylon, not Sinai, has been assigned the final chapter of the world's story. Only this one. And now, as the ground beneath it begins to shift once more, it is as if the mountain remembers, as if the earth itself is preparing for the moment when the one who left through the clouds will return and place his feet upon this sacred ridge again. Beneath the calm surface of the Mount of Olives, below the ancient roots and weathered stones, something far older than human memory is beginning to stir. Few realize that this sacred ridge sits directly on top of one of the most volatile fault lines in the Middle East. A hidden fracture stretching from east to west, mirroring perfectly the direction Zechariah described thousands of years ago. For centuries it rested silent, buried beneath layers of dust and history. But today, that silence is breaking. The world first learned of this fracture not through prophecy, but through construction. In 1964, As Israel prepared to build a hotel atop the mountain, engineers conducted a routine geological survey. What they discovered was anything but routine. Beneath the summit lay a massive tectonic line, an ancient scar in the earth, running straight from the crest of the Mount of Olives toward the eastern gate of Jerusalem. A straight, unbroken path. The same path, Scripture said, would one day split open. Scientists stared at the data in disbelief. Faithful students of prophecy nodded in recognition. Over the decades, deeper studies revealed that the Mount of Olives is not a stable hill, but a strained hinge within the much larger Dead Sea Rift system, one of the most active tectonic zones on the planet. Pressure accumulates beneath Jerusalem like a bowstring drawn tight. Every year, seismic sensors register subtle movements, small shifts, microfractures, internal grinding. Israeli geologists warn that the region is overdue for a major rupture. Not centuries from now, not someday, now. And the most alarming detail? The stress buildup aligns along the exact east to west axis that Zechariah foresaw. Ground-penetrating radar reveals deep pockets of shifting soil and fault creep quiet movements happening far below human sight, as if the Earth is preparing for something it has been destined to do. What began as hairline cracks decades ago are now widening along predictable lines. Pressure zones are forming beneath the eastern ridge, pointing directly toward the sealed eastern gate. Coincidence? Or a countdown? Secular scientists describe it as natural tectonics. But for those who know the scriptures, it sounds like the low rumble of prophecy, awakening geology, and divine promise, moving in unison, step by step. A violent rupture is no longer a question of if, but when. And when it comes, it will not just reshape the mountain, it will reshape history. If this revelation shakes you, don't look away. Watch the next part. The signs grow stronger from here. Across the slopes of the Mount of Olives, signs that were once invisible have now forced themselves into the open. What began as subtle hairline fractures, barely noticeable to passing pilgrims, has grown into a visible pattern etched into the rock and soil. Ancient pathways used for centuries now show jagged seams running through them. Stone stairways, carved long before the modern era, bear fresh breaks that cut across their original lines. The mountain is shifting, and it is no longer hiding its movement. Local residents have been the first to notice. They report stone slabs rising unevenly overnight, narrow cracks widening between one sunrise and the next, and ground that seems to pull apart after periods of unusual calm. Some of the oldest tombs, many dating back 1,000 years or more, have begun to tilt and sink as the earth beneath them loosens. Entire sections of the ancient cemetery have collapsed without warning, leaving archaeologists and engineers scrambling for explanations that grow less convincing by the year. At first, officials claimed that rainfall or erosion was to blame. But erosion cannot cut clean lines through solid stone. Erosion does not create symmetrical patterns that follow the same directional axis from ridge to valley. And erosion does not produce underground pressure pockets measurable by radar. Ground-penetrating technology tells a different story, one far more unsettling. Beneath the olive roots and limestone layers, sensors reveal movement running along a precise path, matching the known location of the Jerusalem fault. These are not random disruptions. They are coordinated shifts, slow, deliberate, and intensifying. Satellite imagery reinforces what human eyes can only partially see. High-resolution scans show tension zones blooming like bruises beneath the terrain, especially along the mountain's eastern ridge. The soil there rises and compresses in ways consistent with tectonic buildup. In multiple images taken months apart, scientists have tracked the stretching of the ground along a clean east-to-west line, the same direction Zechariah recorded. Structures built near the fault have begun to show signs of quiet deformation. Walls bending slightly, foundations settling unevenly, steps warping against their original orientation. Engineers whisper that the land is breathing. Geologists warn that the deeper movements cannot be ignored. What is forming on the surface is only the shadow of what is happening below. The mountain is under strain. Something ancient is pushing upward. And though the world may try to explain it away, the earth itself is writing a message in fractured stone, one that aligns with a prophecy far older than any satellite image. For centuries, Zechariah 14 stood like a sealed scroll, mysterious, majestic, and almost unbelievable. A prophecy so specific, so dramatic, that many dismissed it as poetic metaphor rather than literal truth. Yet, the closer we look at the Mount of Olives today, the more the ancient words begin to take on physical shape. What was once seen as symbolism now feels startlingly concrete. Zechariah wrote, "On that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west." The prophecy describes more than a spiritual moment. It describes a geological event, a landscape-breaking, valley-forming, world-shaking rupture. In ancient times, no one reading these words could imagine how a mountain could split along such a perfect axis. But now, the earth beneath Jerusalem is drawing lines that match the prophet's pen stroke for stroke. Scientists observe the fault. Believers observe the fulfillment. Acts 1 ties the threads together with remarkable precision. As Jesus ascended, two angels declared that he would return in the same way and to the same place. If his return is physical, then the mountain's reaction must be physical as well. That aligns exactly with Zechariah's description. The Messiah's arrival, triggering a seismic transformation. Yet the most astonishing detail is not the splitting of the mountain, it's the timing. Scripture presents the event not as an isolated miracle, but as part of a wider convergence. Zechariah describes a moment when nations surround Jerusalem, when global upheaval intensifies, when darkness and light clash in a single day, unlike any other. These pieces, once scattered across history, now appear simultaneously in the modern world. Wars echo across continents. Political tension coils around Israel. Natural disasters strike with increasing unpredictability. Moral and spiritual confusion deepen across societies. And in the middle of this global turbulence, the very mountain tied to the Messiah's return begins to tremble. Science measures stress. Prophecy measures purpose. The two are no longer conflicting languages, they are becoming parallel testimonies. Even secular researchers, though careful with their words, admit that the Mount of Olives is positioned for a significant geological event. They can identify the forces. They can describe the pressure, but they cannot explain why the fracture line mirrors an ancient prediction written long before modern instruments existed. This alignment, scripture above and seismic activity below, forces a question upon our generation. Is the earth preparing for the moment the Bible has anticipated for millennia? If this opening of prophecy captures your heart, remember to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe so more people can see what's unfolding in our world right now. On the eastern edge of Jerusalem's old city stands a gate that has not opened for nearly 500 years. Its stones are thick, its arch is bricked shut, and its threshold is buried beneath layers of time. To most tourists, the Eastern Gate is just another relic of Ottoman architecture, but to those who know the scriptures, it is something far more unsettling. A silent witness to human attempts to stop a prophecy from unfolding. This is the gate through which Jesus rode on a donkey, welcomed by crowds waving palm branches. It is the gate tied to Ezekiel's vision, where the glory of the Lord entered the temple. and according to Jewish and Christian prophecy alike, it is the gate through which the Messiah will return. No other entrance carries this weight.